Did you know that in over 40 years of investigations, the most dangerous weapon I ever encountered wasn't a firearm? It wasn't a blade or a bomb. It was a word, a look, a carefully manufactured silence. Most people think psychological warfare is something reserved for spies and soldiers in covert operations. They're wrong. The most devastating battlegrounds are living rooms, boardrooms, and family dinners. Toxic people don't need an arsenal to destroy you. They are the arsenal, and their target is your mind, your own perception of reality. They turn your sanity into a weapon and teach you how to use it against yourself. So, if you've ever felt like you're going crazy in a relationship, that you're constantly apologizing, but you're not sure for what, or that you're always one step away from finally getting it right, then listen closely. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about survival. Today, we're not just talking about difficult people. We're dissecting the playbook of the emotional saboteur. We'll start with the first and perhaps most insidious tactic, a game with no finish line called moving the goalposts. This is a classic for a reason. It's designed to keep you in a perpetual state of striving, of trying to please someone who has no intention of ever being pleased. It's the art of making you feel like a failure, even when you've done everything they asked. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Silas. He was a partner in a high-end architecture firm. Brilliant, but a monster to work for. His junior partner, a young man named Kevin, was running himself into the ground trying to earn Silas's approval. First, Silas said the key to a promotion was landing a major client. Kevin worked nights and weekends, and he did it. He brought in the biggest contract in the firm's history. When he went to Silas, expecting a handshake, maybe even a smile, Silas just looked over the documents and said, "The work is admirable, but your presentation skills are weak. You need to become a better public speaker." So, Kevin joined Toastmasters. He practiced until his voice was raw. 6 months later, he gave a presentation that won a standing ovation. He went back to Silas. This time, the goalpost had moved again. "You're focusing too much on the flashy stuff, Kevin. You've lost touch with the technical details. Your blueprints have become sloppy." It never ended. No matter what Kevin achieved, a new, arbitrary requirement would appear. Now, why does this work so well? It taps into a fundamental human drive, the desire for validation and completion. We want to check the box. We want to hear "good job." Moving the goalposts denies you that closure. Psychologically, it's a form of intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that gets people addicted to slot machines. You get just enough encouragement to keep you playing, but the jackpot, the approval, is always just out of reach. This creates a state of learned helplessness, where you start to believe that you are fundamentally inadequate. The problem isn't the game. The problem, you conclude, must be you. Have you ever been in a situation where the rules seemed to change the moment you started winning? Where no matter what you did, it was never, ever enough. That feeling of exhaustion, of chasing a horizon that constantly recedes, that is the intended result. It's a mechanism to break your spirit and ensure you never have the confidence to walk away. The second tactic is one of the dirtiest tricks in the book, something I've seen used to flip an entire interrogation on its head. It's called projection and blame shifting. This is the manipulator's judo move. They take all their own flaws, their own betrayals, their own insecurities, and they throw them directly onto you. They accuse you of doing exactly what they are doing themselves. It's a brilliant and devastating strategy because it's so counterintuitive. Our logical minds struggle to believe that someone could be so audacious, so shameless, as to blame us for their own sins. So, we start to question ourselves. We start to wonder, could they be right? Am I the one who's actually at fault? I consulted on a marital case once. The husband, we'll call him Frank, was convinced his wife Brenda was cheating. He was obsessed. He checked her phone, questioned her about every minute she was late from work, accused her of having secret conversations with coworkers. He painted a picture of himself as the loyal, heartbroken husband being driven mad by her deceit. Brenda was a wreck. She was defending herself constantly, providing alibis, showing him texts, trying to prove her innocence against an endless barrage of suspicion. She loved him, and she couldn't understand his paranoia. She thought maybe she was being insensitive, maybe she wasn't being reassuring enough. She was so busy defending herself that she never stopped to look at his behavior. Of course, you can guess the ending. Frank wasn't suspicious. Frank was guilty. He had been having an affair for over a year. Every accusation he leveled at her was a direct reflection of his own actions. He created such a thick smokescreen of her supposed infidelity that no one, least of all Brenda, thought to look in his direction. This is a powerful psychological defense mechanism. In technical terms, projection allows the manipulator to offload their own feelings of guilt, shame, and inadequacy. Instead of facing their own ugliness, they see it in you. This serves two purposes. First, it absolves them of responsibility. In their mind, they aren't the bad guy you are. Second, it puts you on the defensive. While you're busy explaining and justifying yourself, you're not looking at them. You're not questioning their motives or their actions. They control the entire narrative by making you the villain of a story they wrote. Think about it in a simpler context. The friend who is chronically late but calls you unreliable the one time you now held up in traffic. The coworker who steals ideas from others but accuses everyone else of being unoriginal. When has an accusation from someone else felt strangely specific, almost like a confession disguised as a complaint? This tactic works because it exploits the good nature of empathetic people. You're willing to self-reflect. You're willing to consider that you might be wrong. They are not. They are counting on your conscience to do their dirty work for them. Next, we wade into murkier waters, into tactics that are designed to make you question the very ground you stand on. The first is a form of psychological sabotage, feigning innocence and confusion. The second is a weapon of emotional blackmail, strategic emotional withdrawal. Both are brutally effective. Feigning innocence is the art of playing dumb to escape accountability. It's the wide-eyed, "Who, me?" When you confront them with undeniable proof, they'll say things like, "I have no idea what you're talking about," or "You're not making any sense," or the classic, "I was just joking." Why are you so sensitive? This is more than just denying wrongdoing. It's an attack on your clarity. They aren't just saying, "I didn't do it." They're saying, "Your perception of what I did is crazy." I once interrogated a kid named Leo, a 20-year-old suspected of arson. The evidence was circumstantial but strong. When I sat down with him, he was the picture of polite confusion. I'd lay out a piece of evidence and he'd just tilt his head and say, "I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand how that connects to me." He said it with such earnestness, such believable bewilderment, that my partner started to fidget. I could feel the doubt creeping into the room. Leo wasn't aggressive. He was just confused. He was forcing me to explain every single logical step over and over until the narrative started to sound convoluted and weak, even to me. That's the goal. They want you to get so tangled up in explaining reality that you start to doubt it yourself. It's a cornerstone of gaslighting. Now, let's pair that with its silent, brutal cousin, strategic emotional withdrawal, better known as the silent treatment. Don't ever let anyone tell you that silence isn't a form of abuse. In the right hands, it's a scalpel. When a manipulator is displeased, they won't yell or argue. They'll simply disappear. They'll become a ghost in your own home. They'll stop speaking to you, stop acknowledging your presence. They'll treat you like you don't exist. I saw this in a corporate setting with a pair of business partners, David and Evelyn. When a negotiation wasn't going her way, Evelyn wouldn't fight. She'd just go cold. She would ignore David's emails, walk past him in the hall without a glance, and speak only through her assistant. David would be consumed with anxiety. What did he do? How could he fix it? He'd end up conceding to her demands, not because they were right, but just to end the torment of the silence. Why is this so powerful? Humans are social creatures. The silent treatment triggers our deepest, most primal fear of abandonment and ostracism. On a neurological level, social rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Your body is telling you that you are in danger. The manipulator knows this instinctively. They are punishing you, making you so desperate for reconnection that you'll do anything to get it. You'll apologize for things you didn't do. You'll abandon your own needs. You'll accept their terms. Does silence ever feel louder than shouting to you? Have you ever found yourself apologizing profusely just to get someone, anyone, to speak to you again? That desperation is the intended effect. It's a leash, and they know exactly when to pull it. We now arrive at the tactic that forms the very foundation of a captor and captive dynamic, even when there are no physical bars on the windows. This is the endgame for many manipulators: information and resource control. This is about engineering dependency. The person who uses this tactic seeks to become your sole source of money, information, and even social connection. By cutting off your access to outside resources, they make themselves indispensable. They become your entire world, and in doing so, they gain near absolute power over you. It's a slow, methodical process of isolation, often disguised as care or protection. You don't need to worry about the finances, honey. I'll handle it all. Or, your friends are a bad influence, they just don't understand our connection. Or even, the news is so negative. Just let me tell you what you need to know. I once investigated a family that, for all intents and purposes, functioned like a small cult. The patriarch, a man named Mr. Sterling, was the absolute authority. He controlled the family business, and with it, every dollar that came into the house. His adult children didn't have their own bank accounts. If they needed something, they had to ask him, justify the expense, and await his judgment. He also controlled the flow of information. He curated the news they were exposed to, dismissed any outside opinions as foolish, and actively sowed discord between the siblings and any friends they tried to make. He created a completely closed system where his word was law, because there were no other words to hear. His family members weren't stupid or weak, they were trapped. They were so deeply enmeshed in his reality that they had no external reference point to recognize how toxic it was. This is the grand strategy that makes all the other tactics work more effectively. Gaslighting is more powerful when there's no one around to confirm your perceptions. Financial control makes you hesitate to leave because you literally can't afford to. Social isolation makes their approval feel like the only approval that matters. Have you ever felt like someone was deliberately keeping you in the dark, not to protect you but to control you? This is a calculated move to dismantle your independence. It exploits the basic human need for security. By making themselves the sole provider of that security, they can set any price they want, and the price is usually your autonomy. And here is an essential insight you must understand. These tactics, from moving the goalposts to controlling your resources, are not just a collection of bad habits. They form a coherent, albeit sometimes unconscious, system designed to do one thing: dismantle your sense of self. The goal is to erode your identity until you become a reliable extension of their own will, a character in their story who exists only to serve their needs. It's not about having a disagreement. It's about conquering your reality. Recognizing this pattern is the first, most critical step toward taking your power back. So far, we've been in the dark, mapping out the enemy's strategies. Now, we turn on the lights. We move from diagnosis to defense. The most important thing to understand is that you cannot win the manipulator's game by playing it. You cannot out-gaslight a gaslighter or be more passive-aggressive than a master of the silent treatment. Trying to do so is like wrestling a pig in the mud. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. The goal is not to win their game. The goal is to stop playing. And the first move, the most powerful defense you have, is recognition and naming. You must learn to see the tactic for what it is and call it by its name, even if only to yourself. This sounds simple, almost insultingly so, but its effect is profound. The power of these psychological games lies in their invisibility. They operate in the fog of confusion, guilt, and self-doubt. When you can look at a situation and say, "Ah, he's not just disappointed in me, again, he's moving the goalposts," you pierce that fog. You take something that feels personal and chaotic and turn it into something impersonal and predictable. You are no longer a participant in the drama, you are an observer of a pattern. Let me tell you about a client, a young woman named Clara. She was in a relationship with a man who was, by all accounts, a maestro of manipulation. She came to me thinking she was losing her mind. She felt anxious, forgetful, and emotionally unstable. She thought she was the problem. I had her do one thing: keep a journal, not of her feelings but of his actions. We sat down once a week, and we gave them names. That time he forgot, he promised to help you move. That's feigning innocence. The way he accuses you of flirting when he's the one with wandering eyes, that's projection. The change in her was incredible. The simple act of labeling the behaviors stripped them of their emotional power over her. She stopped seeing his actions as a reflection of her inadequacy and started seeing them as a predictable set of tactics. This isn't just folk wisdom, there's science to back it up. Neuroscientists call it affect labeling. When you put a name to a strong emotional experience, fMRI scans show that activity decreases in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, and increases in the prefrontal cortex, the center of rational thought. In plain English, naming the game moves you from your panic button to your thinking cap. So, what's the practical step? Keep a record, a private journal, a note on your phone, something for your eyes only. When an interaction leaves you feeling confused or guilty, write down exactly what was said and done. Then, look at the list of tactics we've discussed. Find the one that fits. Label it. Watch the pattern emerge. What happens inside you when you stop reacting to the emotional chaos and start identifying the cold, calculated technique behind it? This is the first step to reclaiming your mind. You can't fight an enemy you can't see. This is how you make them visible. Once you can see and name the game, the next step is to refuse to play. This is where we introduce two of the most crucial defensive maneuvers: boundary setting without explanation and emotional detachment, also known as the gray rock method. These two work in concert. One builds the fence, the other makes your yard uninteresting to the intruder. First, let's talk about boundaries. A boundary is not a request. It is not a negotiation. It is a statement of what you will and will not accept. Healthy people understand this. Manipulators, however, see a boundary as a challenge, an invitation to argue, debate, and wear you down until you retreat. This is why the most important part of this defense is the without explanation clause. I worked with a man, Marcus, whose business partner had a habit of delivering brutal insults disguised as just joking in front of clients. It undermined Marcus's authority and left him seething. For years, Marcus tried to explain why it was unprofessional, why it hurt his feelings. This was a mistake. His explanations gave his partner ammunition. The partner would say, "You're too sensitive," or "I'm just trying to lighten the mood." He turned Marcus's feelings into a debate. I coached Marcus to change his approach. The next time it happened, Marcus didn't explain anything. He just looked his partner in the eye and said, calmly and firmly, "Don't speak to me that way." When the partner started with, "It was just a joke," Marcus repeated the exact same phrase, "Don't speak to me that way." Then he turned his attention back to the client. He became a broken record. There was no argument to engage with, no feelings to debate, just a solid wall. The manipulator was left with nowhere to go. Manipulators feed on what I call jade: justify, argue, defend, explain. When you refuse to do any of those things, you starve them. Now, let's add the second layer: emotional detachment. The gray rock method is the art of making yourself as boring and unresponsive as a gray rock. Manipulative and narcissistic people are emotional vampires. They feed on your reactions. It doesn't matter if it's love, hate, anger, or tears. Any strong emotion is a source of narcissistic supply. It tells them they have an effect on you, that they matter. The gray rock method is about cutting off that supply. I once advised a witness in an organized crime case who was being intimidated by associates of the defendant. I told him, whenever they approached him, to become the most boring man alive. Short, factual answers. No emotion, no eye contact, no stories. His life was fine. His work was okay. The weather was normal. He gave them nothing to hook into, no fear to savor, no anger to provoke. Within 2 weeks, they left him alone. He was no longer any fun. Can you see how becoming uninteresting is actually a profound form of power? When someone is trying to provoke you, give them nothing. Respond to inflammatory texts with, "Okay." Give one-word answers to loaded questions. Don't take the bait. Your emotional energy is a precious resource. Stop giving it to people who use it as fuel for their games. Building your internal defenses with boundaries and emotional detachment is essential, but you cannot win this fight alone. A manipulator's power multiplies in isolation. Therefore, your next 2 defensive tactics are about breaking that isolation and building a fortress of reality outside of their influence. These are building an external support system and meticulous documentation. Let's start with support. A core strategy of any psychological abuser is to position themselves as the center of your universe. They will subtly, or not so subtly, drive wedges between you and your friends, your family, even your colleagues. They want to be your only source of validation and information. An external support system is the direct antidote to this poison. It is your reality check. I remember a case involving an elderly woman named Doris, whose new live-in caregiver was a master of this tactic. The caregiver, a woman named Sharon, slowly convinced Doris that her children were too busy for her, that they didn't really care, and that they were after her money. Sharon would forget to give Doris messages from her son, or she'd relay them with a negative spin. Doris became depressed and increasingly dependent on Sharon, who she saw as her only true friend. The family contacted me, worried. Our first objective was simple: re-establish direct contact. We arranged for her son to visit unannounced. The moment Doris saw him, heard his voice, and felt his hug, the entire reality Sharon had constructed shattered like glass. An outside perspective is an anchor. It keeps you from drifting away in the sea of someone else's distorted reality. So, your action item is this: actively cultivate your connections. Schedule a non-negotiable weekly call with a trusted friend. Join a club or a group that has nothing to do with the manipulator. If you can, speak with a therapist or a counselor. These people are your lighthouses in the fog. Next, and this is the private detective in me speaking, you must document everything. Memory is a fragile thing, especially when you are under chronic stress. A manipulator will exploit this. They will deny things they said, rewrite history, and make you feel like you are the one who is forgetful and unreliable. Documentation is your shield against this. It is your objective, undeniable record of the truth. I worked on a contentious divorce case where the husband was incredibly charming in public but verbally abusive in private. He would deny everything in counseling, painting his wife as hysterical and unstable. But she had been smart. For 6 months, she had saved every vicious text message. She had forwarded every threatening email to a secret account her husband didn't know about. She kept a dated log and a locked journal of every major incident. When the time came, it wasn't a he said, she said situation. We had a timeline. We had a record. We had the truth in black and white. Don't think of this as being petty or holding a grudge. Think of it as collecting evidence to protect your own sanity. Save screenshots. Keep a log. Create a file. How would your confidence in your own perceptions change if you had an irrefutable record of what actually happened? This record is for you. It is the proof you'll need when you start to doubt yourself. a concrete foundation when they try to convince you that the ground beneath your feet is an illusion. We have dissected the 5 primary tactics of psychological warfare: moving the goalposts, projection, feigning innocence, emotional withdrawal, and resource control. And we have armed you with 5 powerful defenses: recognition and naming, boundary setting, emotional detachment, building support, and documentation. This is your roadmap. But I want to leave you with something more important than any single tactic or technique. It's a fundamental shift in perspective. For your entire life, you may have been told that being kind, empathetic, and willing to see the best in people are virtues. They are. But in the presence of a manipulator, your greatest strengths can be turned into your greatest vulnerabilities. They are counting on your empathy to excuse their bad behavior. They are counting on your kindness to keep you from setting firm boundaries. They are counting on your desire to see the best in them to blind you to the reality of their actions. This is not a sign of your weakness. In my experience, the most intelligent, capable, and compassionate people are often the primary targets of these emotional predators. Why? Because you're a better source of supply. You try harder. You give more. You take responsibility. You are willing to do the work for both people in the relationship. You must understand this. Your empathy is not a flaw, but it must be protected by the armor of wisdom. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It is an act of survival. You do not owe anyone your sanity. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The ultimate goal here is not to become a better fighter in their toxic arena. The goal is to recognize that the arena itself is the problem and to give yourself permission to walk out of the gate and never look back. You don't have to out-manipulate a manipulator. You just have to reclaim ownership of your own mind, your own reality. That begins the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this pattern of behavior I'm seeing, and why am I tolerating it?" Freedom isn't about winning an argument with them. Freedom is realizing their opinion of you is not your reality. Freedom is the quiet, calm, unshakable knowledge that you are standing on solid ground, and you are the one who gets to decide who is welcome on it. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these tactics have you experienced most often in your life? Sharing it in the comments not only helps you solidify your own understanding, but shows others they aren't alone in this fight. Recognize the patterns. Reclaim your peace.